Hey guys, Caitlin here. Let's talk about Cycle 1, Week 10 and what we did in class today. I have 5 through 7-year-olds, the youngest, second to youngest groups in CC. And so I'm going to share what I did in my class. And as always, everything that I talk about that can be linked is linked in the blog post, which is linked in the description of this video. Okay, let's get going. All right, so for week 10, for timeline, we played Timeline Detective. I had a really small class this week. A bunch of my kids were out, so I only had 5 kids. And so I altered a few of the things just since we had such a small group. But with Timeline Detective, what we did today at least, is I laid out the timeline cards on the table, and since we had such a small group, I would let one kid, like all the kids would close their eyes, one kid would flip a card over, that they'd all open their eyes, and the other kids would try to guess what card had been flipped. For my kids, since they are mostly non-readers, they're just going by the pictures, they usually, they got it right a couple times, a lot of times they're not really sure, so then we sing through this song, figure out which one was flipped, and then we do it again. So they each get a turn to be like the flipper, and then they all, as a group, get to be the detectives. This is how we did it this time, since it was a small group. For math, this week was the squares, and so what I did with that was I took some painter's tape, and I taped out a big square on the floor in my classroom. And so we walked around the square like it was a balance beam as we listened and sang the song. And then we walked backward around the square, and then they crawled around the square. So we just used the square as kind of our path to do a couple of different things. So that's what we did for math. For history, we sang the song, we did the hand motions. I used the Driven by Grace hand motions like I always do. It's like a long one, so go watch her video for the really detailed hand motions that we did. 794, we did Japan, Emperor, Heian period, Kyoto, then the Heian period ended. We did 12th century, Civil War, military commanders, shoguns, feudal system, samurai, took out a sword, then wealthy landowners. So go watch her video if you want more descriptions, but closer looks, slowed down, but just for those who are just wanting the rapid fire, there you go. Okay, so we sang the song with the hand motions a couple times, and then we used those visual cards that I use a lot of weeks. There's 8 cards, which works out really nicely when I have my full class of 8. But today, since I only had 5, I would pull out 5 of them, hand them out. I'd put 3 on the board, kind of like spaced out where they should be in the sentence, and then they would come up one at a time and fill it in. So they love doing that. These are really good for non-readers because they have pictures on them. So when I first hand them out, I go through what each card is so the kids know what their card is, even if they can't read it, and we put them in order that way. For geography, we used these googly eyes. They put them on their hands, and I have them take them around the map and show them the different spots. After we usually, I show it on the big map and then have them trace it or find it with their dry erase marker once on their map. And then we take, if we're doing animals or googly eyes or whatever, and take those around a couple times, and then we erase to get all of our repetitions in. For science, I showed them hand motions, again, Driven by Grace. Her stuff is linked. You can go see her video, but we just did linear, oval, lobed, cleft, scale-like, needle-like. We didn't do a song this week. After we'd gone through the motions a couple of times, I had these they're kind of similar visual cards to the other ones, the history ones that I do. And I printed those off and I laid them out on the table. I actually did 2 sets because what I was intending was when I had my group of 8, I'd have 2 kids go at a time. But since I only had 5, I just let them each go one at a time. So I had them laid out on the table, and they took a pointer and they tapped each one as we went through the list. So super quick and easy. We did science really fast today. And then for Latin, for the 4th declension noun ending, since it's our 2nd week with it, we usually do, just kind of listen to them and sing through them. So today we tried Ring Around the Rosie. And so I had really just 4 that wanted to do the Ring Around the Rosie, and then one little boy who didn't want to hold hands with the other little girls, which was fine. I just had him go in a circle around them. But they just played Ring Around the Rosie, and at the end of the song, they all fell down. It was fine. They enjoyed it, but I don't think they were really paying attention to the song at all. And they were just giggling and trying to spin each other around and stuff. So I don't know that I recommend that one or do that one again, but we tried it. So anyway, that was new grammar. For science today, we did the owl pellet dissection. I am glad to have owl pellets and crayfish / perch fish over with. I do not care for either of those, but the owl pellets were a lot better, at least in my opinion, than the fish. So today was not as gross to me. Anyway, but we just went through the stuff. I used the script that I use a lot of times, and that walks you right through it. And then we investigated, and all was well. So anyway, that's science. For fine arts, we were talking about rhythm today. So I reviewed, and we talked about, you know, the tin whistle. We reviewed our dynamics. We reviewed the notes and how to draw a staff and the treble clef and all that stuff. So there's a series of videos, what's it called? A playlist of videos that I use when I'm planning for fine arts. That's linked in my blog. But I use her ideas, and she teaches her kids how to draw a staff instead of using the printed one. And that's what I did last week, and I did great with it. So we did that again this week. I drew a staff. We drew the treble clef. We practiced drawing the notes. And so then once we were done reviewing, we kind of talked about then the measures and, you know, drawing the bar lines, making the measures, time signature. It was just very basic. Like, I just touched on it and was kind of like, I don't expect them to master or anything like that. It's just an introduction. So we did that. I had this print off. This is from that same fine arts tin whistle workbook thing that I've used for a bunch of stuff. I don't use it as workbook, but I print out a lot of her things and laminate them so I can have them up on my board to show. So anyway, I had this one that had the information about the bar lines and the measures and the time to signature. So we did that. Then I pulled out this, which I showed you guys last week, but I didn't end up using last week. And I'd made a matching worksheet. So I gave the kids the worksheet, and I kind of held mine up like this, and I pulled down a little bit of time. And so I was like, okay, draw a whole note. So they drew a whole note, and then we talked about, okay, how many half notes make a whole note? And so I pulled it down, and they looked at mine after they had said it and drew it. And then we talked about quarter notes, and then we talked about eighth notes. Talked about that and just about the math in it and how the measure and 4/4 time you have like 4 spaces to fill in basically, and different combinations with that. I feel like that part this week was like really over their heads. So we just kind of touched on it, went on. And then I had them draw another staff and had them, and I did one on the board, and we did exactly what is in the foundations guide. And so they had this kind of as a reference, and we talked about like translating this into our staff there. So if you had older kids, you could keep going with that. I did give some, like a really quick example, and made another one that I didn't have them draw, and just showed them like, okay, if we put in 1 half note, like how many spaces are left? What could we put here? And so we put like 2 quarter notes, and kind of like filling up the 4 counts, the 4 beats. Anyway, I don't know. I think it was a little bit much for them, but hey, we gave it a try. And then we sat down with the tin whistles, and we actually played through the whole entire song. We started off, you know, like kind of looking at the scales and the measures and how many notes are in each scale, or how many beats are in each scale, that kind of thing. And then we played it, and they were doing pretty good, so we just kept going, played the whole thing. So that was fine arts. Pretty simple-ish, like it was simple but not simple, you know, like I didn't do a whole lot of crazy stuff. It's pretty straightforward, but also like kind of a difficult concept when you're little. Also when you're big for some of us. Anyway, like me. So then for a review, we played bingo. So I have these bingo cards. I think these came from CC Connected, but regardless, I have them linked in my blog post. And I liked these because they're not cycle specific, so I can use them over and over again, and they're color coded, which is good for my non-readers. So they are color coded. You can use them with whatever. They happen to match these cards right here, which I use. These are the little flashcards from CC Connected. So that makes it really easy for me and for the kids. If you don't have those cards, you can still do it. And if you have non-readers, you can just say, okay, we're in geography, that's a purple one. So you don't have to look and see for yourself. For me, whenever I pulled one, okay, everybody could see it was yellow. So I would pull a card, they would see which one it was, they'd go ahead and mark it on their bingo card so that they weren't distracted. Then we'd go through that piece of memory work, sing it, say it, whatever, and then I'd do another one. And I just had to mark them with dry erase markers. I thought about using like little counters or candies or something, but I just like try to think ahead and troubleshoot, and could just see a kid whacking their arm on it and counters going everywhere, and them not knowing what they'd had on there and being sad. And I didn't want that. So I just did something like a marker, because then once it's on there, it's on there. So anyway, they had fun with it. Like I said, a little bitty group. So it was pretty simple to go through, but they enjoyed it. The only thing I would say is just be careful, because history and timeline are pretty close colors. So I just had to point out to them, history's the darker blue and timeline is the lighter blue. So anyway, that was fine. That was good. And that was it for week 10. Pretty simple week. So that's everything. Hope that helps. Hope you have a great week 10, and I'll see you next week. Bye, guys.